Have you ever had a season in your life where you genuinely felt like you were doing everything right, but somehow no one seemed to notice? Maybe you kept showing up with consistency, serving with your whole heart, staying faithful behind the scenes, while others around you easily stepped into the spotlight. If you have ever felt invisible, overlooked, or unappreciated, even while giving your best, then what comes next will change the way you see your own path. Because this is the powerful, often untold story of Reggie Smith, a man who waited over 10 years before receiving the recognition he deserved, a man who never once complained, and who eventually became one of the most respected and beloved voices in contemporary gospel music. But the true strength of his story isn't just about his incredible vocal ability, though he certainly has that. What makes his journey meaningful is what it teaches us about faith, patience, timing, and the kind of legacy that truly lasts. By the end of this story, you will understand why some of the most impactful achievements in life come not from chasing attention, but from quietly perfecting your craft in obscurity. And you will also learn the exact mindset shift that can turn seasons of waiting from something painful into something deeply purposeful. Let's begin with something that might surprise you. Reggie Smith didn't grow up dreaming of fame or seeing himself as a star on a big stage. He was raised in Jonesboro, Arkansas, in a modest family where life revolved around three things: church, school, and music. His community held a strong gospel tradition, but no one in his life pushed him toward pursuing music as a career or using it as a way to become famous. For Reggie, music naturally became something far more meaningful, something spiritual, something that felt like his true calling. And here lies the first insight that shapes everything that follows. When your motivation is calling rather than ambition, you form a completely different relationship with your work. You stop measuring success by applause, and you start measuring it by integrity. Reggie understood this instinctively. Even as a young man, his family recognized that his voice had a unique quality: warm, grounded, and sincere. One of those voices that didn't shout for attention, but quietly commanded respect. Reggie developed his talent intentionally. He studied vocal performance and music at Arkansas State University, and afterward, he made a bold strategic move. He relocated to Nashville, Tennessee, the heart of country and gospel music. For many people, this would be the part of the story where their big break happens, where they network aggressively and push themselves into the spotlight. But Reggie's journey took a very different route. And this is where his story becomes especially valuable. In the early 2000s, he and his wife, Lady Love Smith, began performing together. Slowly, they built something that most aspiring artists overlook: an extraordinary reputation for excellence behind the scenes. They became highly trusted background session singers for some of the biggest names in gospel music, recording with renowned artists like Sandy Patty, Larnell Harris, and eventually Bill and Gloria Gaither. They were in major studios. They performed on major tours, and their voices reached hundreds of thousands of people. Yet almost no one knew their names. Many would see this as a setback, believing that anonymity means failure. But Reggie saw something entirely different. He saw refinement. Every recording session became a classroom. Every tour became training. He wasn't just learning how to sing. He was learning how to serve a greater artistic and spiritual vision. And this reveals a deep truth most ambitious people miss. Spending years as a supporting voice doesn't mean you. Reggie's character was tested even more deeply around 2005, when the Gaither Vocal Band began featuring him and Lady regularly in their recordings and tours. For 10 full years, an entire decade, Reggie and his wife provided harmony vocals for Gaither homecoming albums, DVDs, and live events. 10 years of dedication. In a culture where people expect fast results, sometimes within weeks or months, Reggie kept showing up with excellence for 10 years, without a title, without top billing, without the recognition many believe they are entitled to after such long commitment. During this time, the Gaither Vocal Band cycled through multiple lead vocalists. Guy Penrod left. Mark Lowry went through personal and professional changes. David Phelps dazzled audiences with his extraordinary tenor, and Michael English went through his own ups and downs. All of these men were celebrated, introduced on stage, highlighted on albums, and showered with applause. Meanwhile, Reggie remains steady, serving. This is where an important psychological truth comes in, one that rarely gets discussed openly. Waiting like this doesn't test your talent. It tests your character. Anyone can perform well when the crowd is cheering, but can you perform with joy, with spiritual authenticity, with unwavering commitment when no one is watching? Can you genuinely celebrate others' success while you continue waiting for your own breakthrough? Reggie answered yes to both questions, not once or twice, but every single day for an entire decade. And something transformative happened during that waiting period. Because when you stop chasing attention, your growth accelerates. You become a student instead of a competitor. You learn vocal technique, harmony, and musical arrangement from inside the most respected gospel group in the world. You learn how Bill Gaither creates arrangements, manages different personalities, and balances commercial expectations with spiritual truth. You learn what works in a live sea. You understand the difference between technical perfection and emotional connection. Most importantly, you build meaningful relationships. Relationships rooted in respect, reliability, and humility, not competition. The musicians, the crew, the fellow singers, everyone came to see Reggie as someone trustworthy, someone who lifted others rather than seeking to be lifted. This is what real influence looks like. By 2017, everything changed. David Phelps decided to pursue new opportunities. His departure was massive because Phelps wasn't just another singer. He was a defining voice, a powerhouse tenor who had shaped an entire era of the Gaither Vocal Band. The organization now faced a difficult question. Who could possibly fill that space? Here's where the internal politics of the music world become clear. Reggie was finally invited to join as an official member, but he wasn't brought in to replace Phelps. Instead, he was brought in to offer something entirely different. He didn't try to mimic Phelps's range or recreate his star-driven energy. Instead, he leaned into his own gift, a rich, soulful baritone that grounded the group's harmonies and brought warmth and depth to their arrangements. But the transition wasn't easy. Some longtime fans weren't ready to embrace him. Online, he saw comments calling him too plain, not enough of a star, not flashy or powerful enough. These weren't just critiques. They were rejections of his presence in the very role he had spent more than a decade serving toward. Imagine finally achieving something you've worked so long for, only to have people say you're not worthy of it. Most people would have broken under that weight. But Reggie didn't lash out, didn't fall into bitterness, and didn't defend himself aggressively. He stayed composed, gracious, and focused. But that doesn't mean the criticism didn't hurt. It did. This is the uncomfortable truth about any significant achievement. It comes with pain. The difference between those who succeed and those who quit is not that the successful never face rejection. It's that they feel the rejection, acknowledge it, and keep moving forward. They don't let it make them bitter. They let it make them better. And behind the scenes, Reggie navigated even more challenges that few people hear about. He had his own ideas about music, about arrangement, and about artistic direction. But he was entering a group led by Bill Gaither, a legend with a very particular vision for sound, tradition, and branding. Bill was open to ideas, but he also maintained strong creative control, which was necessary for protecting the group's legacy. Reggie had to learn how to honor his personal style while submitting to a larger mission. This ability to know your worth, but also to respect a greater purpose, is one of the rarest skills in any creative or professional environment. Additionally, full-time touring is brutal. in a way that many people outside the industry rarely understand. While other band members had established families or steady support systems waiting for them at home, Reggie and Lady were trying to manage marriage, ministry, and mental health, all while traveling most of the year. There were long seasons filled with exhaustion, overwhelming homesickness, and the kind of relational strain that slowly builds when you're constantly in motion. Lady has openly discussed in interviews how their marriage felt during those stretches. The weight of constant travel, the emotional distance caused by separation from their community, and the intense pressure that comes with trying to hold everything together. This isn't romantic. This isn't what you see on stage with perfect smiles and beautiful harmonies. This is real life, raw and unfiltered, and Reggie had to navigate all of it while maintaining excellence in his public role. What's remarkable about Reggie's response to these obstacles is what it reveals about his character under pressure. When Mark Lowry left the group amid creative tensions and public disagreements, Reggie faced his own internal conflicts too, but he handled them privately without making noise. While other band members occasionally had public dust-ups or creative controversies that made headlines, Reggie kept his struggles internal and dealt with disagreements behind closed doors. If he didn't like an arrangement or a staging decision, he worked through it respectfully. He never used social media to call out frustrations. He never participated in the kind of performative conflict that others in the industry seem to court. Instead, he invested his energy into being a stabilizer, someone who quietly supports the structure so everything else can stand. Backstage, he was praying with crew members. He was mentoring up-and-coming performers like Wes Hampton and Todd Sabuttles. This is the definition of servant leadership, though Reggie would probably hate being labeled with that term. It wasn't a performance for him. It wasn't a strategy. It was simply how he lived. People who worked with him directly describe him as kind, deeply knowledgeable about music and theology, and firmly grounded in his beliefs. Outside of performances, he and Lady coach young Christian couples, speak at churches, and have become advocates for mental health awareness and adoption. They've experienced personal tragedy themselves, including miscarriage, and have openly discussed how God's faithfulness showed up in their darkest moments. This personal foundation completely changes how Reggie approaches performing. When he sings songs like Through It All or I Know Who Holds Tomorrow, he's not just executing vocal technique. He's testifying. He's sharing what he actually knows from lived experience. He's singing about promises he's tested and foundational truths he's depended on during. This level of authenticity cannot be manufactured, and it cannot be rushed. It only comes through years of genuine spiritual development, heartbreak, disappointment, and unwavering faith, and audiences feel the difference. It's the reason why some performers can walk into a room and instantly captivate everyone, while others, despite hitting every note perfectly, somehow feel hollow. Real presence comes from real depth, and real depth takes time to develop. It's not something you can shortcut. It's not something you can fake. That's why waiting periods, struggles, and obstacles aren't detours from success. They're prerequisites for meaningful success. Today, Reggie Smith occupies a completely different position than he did in 2015. He's no longer the new member trying to prove himself or the question mark that sparked fan debate. He's now a vital, respected member of the Gaither Vocal Band, but his role has evolved far beyond just being a vocalist. In a group whose history includes frequent personnel changes, creative conflicts, and more than a little behind-the-scenes drama, Reggie represents something different: consistency, compassion, and spiritual rootedness. What Bill Gaither recognized 10 years earlier than the general public is now evident to anyone paying attention. Reggie brings something irreplaceable to the ensemble. You don't always see it in a single highlight reel or a 30-second promotional clip, but you feel it when you experience the group over a full album or an entire tour. Here's the profound lesson that Reggie's story illustrates. a lesson relevant whether you are in music, business, relationships, or any meaningful field. Your greatest position of influence rarely comes from fighting for it. It comes from being faithful where you're planted and allowing your character to speak louder than your ambition. Reggie didn't campaign for a spot in the Gaither Vocal Band. He didn't network aggressively or use social media to build a personal brand meant to pressure the organization into featuring him. He simply showed up. He sang with excellence. He supported others. He grew spiritually. He developed as an artist and as a person. And when the organization eventually needed someone with his specific qualities, he was ready, not just musically, but spiritually and emotionally as well. This is what divine timing actually looks like in practice. It doesn't always feel like a dramatic breakthrough in the moment. It often feels like a natural unfolding of who you've been becoming all along. The deeper truth revealed in Reggie's journey is this: in a culture obsessed with visibility, recognition, and personal branding, genuine greatness often looks unremarkable. It doesn't come with scandal. It doesn't generate viral moments or controversy. It doesn't demand attention. Instead, it quietly builds one faithful choice at a time until, eventually. Reggie never had a public breakdown or a dramatic comeback narrative. He never had to cancel tour dates or take time off to find himself. His story doesn't have the kind of explosive arc that goes viral online, but it has something far more valuable. It has integrity. It has proven character. It has a man whose private life and public life reflect the same values, which is increasingly rare in an era where people often manage multiple online identities like separate costumes. If you're someone who feels like you're working hard but nobody's watching, if you're showing up consistently but not getting recognized, if you're starting to wonder whether faithfulness even matters in a world that seems to reward aggression and nonstop self-promotion, Reggie Smith's story is a direct answer to your doubt. Your faithfulness matters. The work you're doing in the unseen spaces counts. The character you're developing while nobody applauds will become your greatest asset when your season of visibility finally arrives. And most importantly, your waiting period isn't wasted time. It's essential preparation. The version of you that emerges from that waiting season will be far more capable and spiritually grounded than the version that would have forced its way into prominence prematurely. Reggie Smith understood this, not just intellectually, but through lived experience. He trusted it even when trusting felt difficult, and that trust has built a legacy that will outlast trends, outlast criticism, and outlast the temporary fame that rises and falls so quickly in entertainment. His legacy shapes culture quietly, influences people spiritually, and stands as a testimony that faithfulness, humility, and genuine character still matter in a world increasingly convinced they don't. Are you willing to embrace a path that doesn't rely on noise, spectacle, or self-promotion, but on consistent excellence, authentic character, and faithful service right where you are? Because this isn't just the story of one gospel singer. It's a blueprint for meaningful success in any field. Think about the people you respect most in your own life. Chances are, they're not the loudest individuals in the room. They're not constantly talking about themselves. They're not chasing validation. They're the ones who show up consistently, help without expecting credit, grow through their struggles, and speak from genuine experience. That's the kind of person Reggie became. And that's the kind of person you can become if you're willing to play the long game. The music industry, like every competitive field, is filled with talented people who burned out because they were either running from something or running toward applause instead of running toward their calling.